Session on the next one, right?
Yeah. All right, if you would please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The school board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on corporation matters. Community members requesting permission to address the board are required to complete a registration form prior to a motion to approve a specific agenda item. Individuals will be permitted to speak during the specific agenda item before a vote takes place. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. Any questions on personnel should be directed to the superintendent by contacting his office. No participant may speak more than once, are limited to 3 minutes, and may not pass their minutes to another participant. So first thing on today's special agenda for our work session is to adopt the agenda. Could I please have a motion? I have a motion from Mr. DeMeyer. Could I have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Do we have any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion will pass 5-0, and that will bring us to our public work session. And tonight we've got an Indiana legislation update from Baker Tilly. And Tim, I'm going to have you introduce our guest, please.
Yes, it's my pleasure to welcome back Brock. It's been here before. Brock's from Baker Tilly. It's going to go through that legislative impact and how it might affect our financial planning. So let's make sure we have enough time. You want to turn Brock loose?
Yep, thanks, Tim. President King, members of the board, pleasure to be back here in New Prairie. It's Dr. White and Mr. Scott mentioned Brock Bausch from Baker Tilly. I work out of our Indianapolis office, but also have team members out of the Mishawaka office. So 3 main goals for tonight. I think there's a lot of perhaps perception or lack of clarity, we'll call it, regarding some new legislation and how it will impact not just schools, but municipalities throughout the state of Indiana. So 3 main goals to walk you through this evening is help you understand what is changing from a property tax standpoint, when it's changing, and ultimately then to the last part of how it could impact New Prairie going forward. So lots of fun we'll have this evening with the agenda. I'll just let it run.
Okay.
So really quickly, I wanted to give the board a sense of how things are so different from a school perspective. And Dr. White and Mr. Scott, please jump in with your perspective on the slide. Get this question quite a bit as we work with approximately 70% of schools throughout the state of Indiana and a large group nationally. It's, why aren't schools just operating the way they were when I was a kid? And we wanted to give a quick reminder of, you'll see in red, some of the federal legislative changes and impacts from the past 30 to 35 years. In the blue, though, is all of the changes we've seen over the past 30 years regarding Indiana-specific changes. I'm out of my element when I'm talking about, excuse me, some of the academic changes. As again, Dr. White and Mr. Scott can talk circles about that around me. But I want to highlight tonight is we'll mention, when we talk about the property tax system in Indiana, the current system has been in place for about 50 years. About every 12 years on average right now, we've seen some changes. So the most recent change was back in 2008. From a property tax standpoint, probably more familiar now with circuit breaker, tax caps. That started in 2008. So we've not seen any large fundamental changes up until this past legislative session. So we'll spend a lot of our time this evening talking about Senate Rolled Act 1, SCA 1. But again, I want to give a quick highlight of how so many things have changed federally and at state level for the past 30 years. So as we get into some of the summaries of what's changing, this is a bill that is not a one and done. So from a foundational standpoint, 2005 is when we're seeing the initial impact to schools and municipalities take place. but this is a 6-year phase-in of some property tax changes for multiple types of property. So just to quickly highlight, in 2005, when we talk about the effective date, July 1st, 2025, beginning teacher pay throughout the state of Indiana has to increase to $45,000. With that same bill, the compensation part of it, so we talk about teacher compensation, that is teacher salary, teacher benefits, has to be 65% of your education fund state aid. Right now, it's a 62% minimum, effective July 1st, 2025. Schools have to spend a targeted 65% of state aid toward teacher compensation. Now, there's not if a school does not comply with that, there's not any type of penalty. Essentially, you have to have another hearing to state why you don't comply with that law. There's some additional factors that really don't impact New Prairie at this point, with some minimum thresholds for a capital referendum. But just be aware that if your non-exempt debt, so when we talk about your non-exempt debt, we're talking about your non-referendum debt, 70 cents or more. Even if you're pursuing a project of $500,000, it has to go to referendum. New Prairie, based upon what we see today, is not impacted by that. All referendum going forward has to be held on a November even year ballot. You'll see a handful of districts who will have a referendum. This November is kind of the last time opportunity. We anticipate there will be about 5 districts, but beginning effective July 1st, every school district has to have, if they go pursue a referendum, has to be on an even year November ballot. One thing we'll keep track of is what's called a general obligation bond, or GO bond, cooling off period. So anytime a school district has a bond with, right now, a 5 or year less repayment on a GO bond, they can't issue bonds again for the year it matures. So let's take, for example, if New Prairie would issue bonds 3 years ago and the bonds mature in 2026, so say January 2026, it would mean that New Prairie could not issue GO bonds in 2026. You'd have to wait until 2027. That doesn't mean there's not a way around it, meaning you could issue what are called first mortgage bonds, or have the repayment be longer than 6 years. Just know there's a restriction on the repayment term and the timing of the bonds. So that's just taking place in 2025. So that's the first domino. 2026, so when we talk about 2026 taxes, we're talking about property taxes payable in 2026. That's when we're seeing the first year of the phase-in of the new homestead deduction, which we'll go through in a little more detail here in just a moment. So business personal property exemption, we'll talk about that here a little bit more detail as well. So commercial, industrial will receive some exemptions on business personal property. And beginning in assessment 2026, there will be a new de minimis amount for business personal property. Beginning in 2026, pay 2027, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. MLGQ will revert back to a state formula. MLGQ is max levy growth quotient. So there's a limit on MLGQ for 4% in 2026. It'll go back to the state formula for 2026, pay 2027. Another mechanism that schools have, and I think, pardon me, a theme you'll hear throughout this presentation is that there will be levers that municipalities can pull. So they gave options on this property tax change for cities, counties, but none for schools. So schools have fewer tools compared to your peers who, with this property tax change, can pull a lever for local income tax. Schools do not have that lever for local income tax. But this bottom bullet point, what's called the excessive levy appeal, schools who are growing or have an increase in transportation or mileage that you were anticipating could seek to increase your operations fund levy. That's being eliminated beginning in budget year 2026. So another tool in the tool shed that's being taken away from schools. 2027 is the next phase in of homestead deductions. It's the final year of LIT, and LIT is local income tax. We'll get into that a little bit here toward the coming slides. And regarding local income tax, counties and municipalities will be able to structure a new LIT beginning in 2028. I'm going to say that again because this is that lever that counties and cities can pull beginning in the budget year 2028 that schools do not have the option of pulling. So you are subject to one type of revenue source at the local level, property taxes. For cities and counties now, traditionally, who are pulling that property tax lever can now pull a local income tax lever with this new legislation. That's all taking effect in 2027. In 2028, additional year of a phase-in for homestead deductions. Then schools throughout the state of Indiana will be required to share charter school revenue based upon a formula. We'll look at that a little bit more detail later on. Then this new mechanism for LIT takes place in 2028 if cities and counties adopt it. So that's just over the next 3 years. We're not done. 2029 is, we'll see an additional year of phase-in for property tax deductions for homestead and 2% properties. Then there will be an additional beginning for budget year 2030. You'll have to have an additional budget hearing to adopt your 2030 budget. That's more procedural than anything else, just another step in the process, in the budget development process. Then in 2030, additional phasing in of the homestead deduction, the 2% property deduction. Then in 2031 is when we have fully phased in these new property tax changes. We'll look at that in a little more detail. And some LIT detail of adoption for counties and cities. That's perhaps another conversation for another day, but I want to continue to emphasize the point that cities and counties have more options and levers they can pull than schools on the revenue side. So as we get into some property tax changes, I first want to highlight from the House Enrolled Act 1001. For those in the room, you know, every 2 years, the state of Indiana adopts statewide budget. This most recent session was a state budget session. So House Bill 1001 is always the budget bill. So when it's enacted, it's called House Enrolled Act 1001. So as we look at what the state of Indiana determined for New Prairie based upon estimates, fiscal year 2025 is already set. So that's the amount New Prairie is receiving as of today. ADM, they had determined 2,857. Two virtual students, the total ADM 2,859 per. So the total per person funding is 20.28 million. That's for fiscal year 2025. So basically the 2024-2025 school year. That calculates out to a funding per ADM, average daily membership, of 7,094. So looking over the next 2 years, what the state of Indiana projected is fiscal year 2026, an ADM of 2,837, or estimating a decrease of 20 students. But what they had estimated as part of their funding formula, about a 3% increase. But once you start digging into the detail, you know that you're already receiving about $150 per student that they included in their funding formula. So you're getting that as part of textbook rental. If you remember, you have kids, a couple of years ago, you were paying an annual textbook rental for textbooks and consumables. So the state of Indiana took that over. Now they're including it as part of the funding formula. But if you look on their documents, you're getting 3% new money. If you pull out those dollars you're already receiving, you're actually expecting to get about $7,200 per kid, or about 1.5% new money this next school year. They're also projecting you to get 2% additional in fiscal year 2027. But once you pull out that $150 you're already receiving, actual new dollars are about 1.5% again. So collectively, over the next 2 years, aggregate about 3% new money. As you all know, right now, inflation is moving to about 2 to 3% per month or year over year. So what we're anticipating, this 1.5% increase each year, will not keep up with inflation. That's based upon their ADM estimates you see of 2,837 and 2,816. If you're wondering, well, what if our ADM remained flat? So if we continue to have 2,857 kids, well then below is what the numbers would look like if you compare apples to apples if your ADM remained flat. So about a 1.4% increase year over year, and then 2.2% after that. So that's House of Rule Act 1001. So let's get into some details about what's changing on the property tax standard. So in 2025, a little bit of background for New Prairie, your total levy, so your levy is what the tax is on all taxable property within New Prairie schools. Your certified levy is 13.7 million. Your what's called certified net assessed value. So this team probably knows, you're going to hear me say the term gross assessed value and net assessed value. Gross assessed value is the market value of that property. Net assessed value is the taxable value of that property. So the taxable assessed value for your operations fund and your non-referendum debt is about 1.2 billion. You collect on the referendum debt. What's nice about referendum debt is you collect taxable property within TIF districts. So that's where you see the difference of about 200 million. It's because of this TIF AV you see there below of about 199 million. So referendum debt really helps spread the taxable value on the assessment side. But sorry, I don't mean to grab you over here. What I want to bring to your attention here for the coming slides is the breakdown or the characteristics of your AV. There are 4 main components of your assessed value. The 1% bucket, so anytime you hear Mr. Scott, Dr. White, or myself talk about the 1% property, we're talking about homestead properties. So any homeowner within New Prairie schools. Your total taxable value for the homestead portion is about 40%. So 40% of your net assessed value are homeowners. The 2% bucket is rental property, so home rentals, is ag land and long-term care. So about 30% of your AV is made up of this 2% bucket. And the final part, commercial and industrial and business personal property, the 3% bucket, collectively is about 30%. So the reason why that's important is, as we see the phase-in of these new deductions, the largest portion of your AV are homeowners. So as the homeowners receive greater deduction, that means that taxable value will begin to shrink over the 6 years, which will impact your tax rate, which we'll get into. So as we get into more details of what's changing, I always like to provide this as a basis of knowledge and reference. For New Prairie, here's a list of your top 10 taxpayers. When we talk about top 10 taxpayers, we're talking about on the assessment side. This figure here, this 28.6%, so if you add up these top 10 taxpayers, they represent 28.6% of your total assessment for pay 2025. The reason why we always keep track of this, as do credit rating agencies, is because if one of these top 10 begin to struggle business-wise or economically, that puts the district at risk from an assessment standpoint. Not saying anybody is struggling, just saying that's why we pull these, because as we look and think about in the coming slides what's happening with business personal property, is who of these top 10 taxpayers could seize this new opportunity that could impact your total assessed value. So just keep this in the back of your mind in the coming slides, how we manage the tax rate going forward. So first things first, you as a homeowner, what's changing for you over the next 6 years? Right now in 2025, you are receiving a flat $48,000 homestead deduction, then an additional 37.5 supplemental homestead deduction. We'll go through some math examples here in a moment. But with the General Assembly, and as Mr. Scott heard yesterday from Representative Thompson, who authored this initial bill, or was one of the sponsors for it, you see with AV growing the past few years and market values rising pretty significantly, there was concern that the standard deduction kind of loses value as a market value grows, because this is just a flat amount. So the goal from the General Assembly standpoint is we want to phase out this flat homestead deduction and move to a supplemental homestead deduction that's a percentage. So as gross AV rises, we also wanted this supplemental homestead deduction to rise, so the taxable value doesn't increase significantly like we've seen in the past few years. This last section here, we'll talk a little bit more about in the coming slides. What they found is, as they were passing legislation on this change to a supplemental homestead deduction percentage, that it may not impact the total tax bill too greatly. So they added this supplemental homestead credit. What it means is every homeowner is going to receive either $300 or an estimated 10% of the property tax bill as additional credit to decrease the tax bill. We've never received that before, but there will be an impact to New Prairie and all municipalities with this additional credit. We'll go through that detail here in the next slide, but there's some additional credits for 65 and older and disabilities. I know I'm going through a lot of detail, so if something doesn't make sense, please stop me. So let's talk about what it looks like to the average taxpayer within New Prairie. So this average home value in New Prairie, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, $232,400. You saw in the prior slide a standard deduction of $48,000. So for those of you who like to do the math as I'm working through it, you would take the $232,000 minus $48,000 times 0.375, and you'll get that $69,150. So the gross assessed value for that average home has a taxable value in 2025 of about $115,000. So as we talked on the prior slide, and I wanted to give you a basis of comparison, I know there's a lot of numbers on this. So there's the current system that we'll describe as the old system. So if we kept the existing system in place and we assume annual increase of 3%, modest increase of 3% per year on market value, you can see the pretty significant difference between the old system and SEA 1. So the standard deduction in 2026, both were being kept at $48,000. The supplemental deduction in 2026 would have been 35%, while now it's increasing to 40%. So that same home, pay 2026, will actually see a little bit of a decrease in assessed value based upon SCA 1. But then year by year, sorry, again, proud you, for SCA 1, as we phase out this flat deduction and go to a percentage, if you listen to nothing else I say, want you to pay attention to this bottom line percentage, because that will be your annual trend for average homes increasing 3% per year. That this net assessed value is going to be impacted year by year. So as you were experiencing increases in net assessed value for the past few years based upon the old system, now we're going to see that this average taxpayer would go from a net assessed value of $115,000 in 2025 to when the new system, SCA 1 in 2031, has a net assessed value of about $92,000. So that's part of that 40% bucket. That 1% bucket could be driving down your net assessed value over the next 6-7 years. So looking at some examples, New Prairie Schools is made up of 7 taxing districts. Your largest percentage-wise is Olive Township. So I pulled Olive Township as an example, making some broad assumptions. So it's average taxpayer at the top. I'm not going to go back through how to calculate the net assessed value since we went through that in the prior slide. But if we took the average taxpayer in Olive Township, knowing they're paying a total tax rate of $2.62 in 2025, their estimated maximum tax cap, that is calculating the 1% of their gross assessed value plus your referendum tax rate, since that's above the cap. This average taxpayer would have a tax cap of $2,713, but based upon the net assessed value multiplied by the total tax rate, they would have a gross tax liability of $3,028. Since Olive Township is in St. Joe's County, there's something called property tax replacement credit, PTRC. Fort County doesn't have a PTRC, but this example, there is a property tax replacement credit. So this homeowner is paying part of their income tax in order to decrease their tax bill. So after you apply that PTRC, the liability before circuit breaker is $2,633. Since $2,633 is less than $2,713, this average taxpayer is not hitting their tax cap limit. So their total tax bill in 2025, $2,633. All with me? Good. So in 2026, that same math applies. What's changing is, the only assumption I'm making is keeping all debt levies for not just New Prairie, but overlapping units, the flat, keeping that flat from 2025. I'm only increasing operating levies by 4%. So since I'm assuming that total AV is decreasing, I'm estimating that the total taxing district will have a tax rate of about $2.73. On that assumption, with this average taxpayer's AV going down to $114,823, same math, total gross liability is $3,143, but assuming we're going to continue to receive that property tax replacement credit, they're still slightly below their circuit breaker limit in 2026. However, as you heard me say, there is an additional credit being offered in 2026 and beyond of $300 or 10%. That's why you see this additional $273 credit coming off the bottom. So this average taxpayer could see, based upon these assumptions, a property tax bill decreasing 6%. So I'm not going to go through each year, but you can see how the formulas run. So this average taxpayer currently paying an estimated $2,633 will essentially have a pretty level tax bill over the next 2 to 3 years and won't pay more than what they're paying till an estimated 2029. So that's what's happening for the average taxpayer if they live in Olive Township.
So even if New Prairie takes out no new debt in 2026, our tax rate will be going up.
We'll talk about that in more detail, but the answer to that question is yes. So the 2% property tax group, this is ag land, rental property, and long-term care. They're going to begin receiving property tax deductions that they never had before. So it's another 6-year phase-in where there's no deduction in 2025, and you see an increase of 6% per year, ultimately to 2031, when 1/3 of those properties will have a deduction. This is farmland. Looking at your gross assessed value, New Prairie is about 7% farmland. So here is about a 20-year snapshot of the trend of farmland. It was called base rate going back to 2007. A pretty nice slope up that farmland has been increasing in value over that 20-year time horizon. Pretty significant increases in 2015. That's when the General Assembly intervened and slowed down the growth. We actually had some years of decrease. We're in 2025, and what we're expecting with this new legislation is base rate will decrease compared to 2025 and 2026, and we'll have a slight increase in 2027. So it's another group who's going to be receiving some deductions that have not before. Business personal property, this is the one that's really difficult to project on because it's really a business by business circumstance and what's happening with them. So I see a lot of cranes being moved off the highway, and so it's a lot of development that's emerging. But beginning in 2027, the de minimis amount on business personal property is increasing from 80,000 to 2 million. So what that means right now is if you own a business or you're a farmer and you own equipment that is valued at 80,000 or less, you don't pay property taxes on it because it's considered de minimis. That de minimis amount increases to 2 million in 2027. So right now, if you have a value of $80,001 to 2 million, over that time, you won't have to pay property taxes beginning in 2027 on those values. This last piece of the floor. So the example I use is if you're Amazon and you're developing new property. Past, let's say you invested $10 million in manufacturing equipment or logistics equipment. You would typically depreciate that over 10 years. So 10 million depreciates by $1 million a year. Then if the floor was at 3 million, you continue to pay $3 million of AV on that property. That $3 million example goes away for any new business personal property purchased in 2025 and beyond. So this is the one that is going to be circumstantial for companies because now it changes their financial modeling of, well, maybe now we make a new investment in 2025 before we anticipate it. It's really difficult to project what could be the impact there because companies now could look to replace equipment sooner than what we anticipated. And as you recall, about 7% of your AV is business personal property. So all that being said is, so, okay, Brock, you understand what's changing, you understand when it's changing, so what does it really mean to New Prairie schools? So first thing, I wanted to give you a sense of what the calculation could look like for that charter school share beginning in 2028. The DLGF posted a webinar last week, and they're still working through a 300+ page bill. So this is not definitively what it could look like, but this is what we're assuming it could look like. Based upon your most recent ADM from spring, 2,842 students, how many kids from New Prairie are attending a brick and mortar charter school? So not just a virtual, not a virtual charter school, but in-person brick and mortar charter school. And by my count, 10 kids who live within New Prairie are going to a brick and mortar charter school. So based upon the formula of either 100 or more or 2% or more, whichever is greater, New Prairie would have to share operations fund dollars in 2028 with those charter schools. And since the answer to both of those questions is no, this does not impact New Prairie based upon these numbers in 2028. Will have to be a number we keep an eye on the next couple of years, and I anticipate the DLGF will provide more guidance over the next 2 years as well. But important caveat, please.
Quick question. Let's just say for the sake of this question, the answer to that was yes. We don't have a brick and mortar charter school in our traditional district boundaries. So if the answer was yes, would we be sharing tax dollars with a charter school outside of our traditional boundaries?
That's a really great question.
Or is it just about charters inside your traditional boundaries?
Good question. So the answer to that question is located wherever their kids are going, the dollars will follow the student.
Even outside of your boundaries?
Not just outside your boundaries, but outside your county potentially. So if you have a student who's attending a charter school in Elkhart County, county auditor would distribute those dollars to Elkhart County Charter School.
Okay.
So it's
What are
really
the changes?
it fundamentally changes how you should perceive property taxes. Because typically you're paying property taxes for services you're receiving within your taxing district. And now you start seeing property taxes flow out the taxing district for a county, it really changes the dynamic of it. It's a really good question.
So it was once that the charter school had to be inside your boundaries, but this Senate Enrolled Act changed that, and now it doesn't matter where the physical location.
That's exactly.
If it's yes to this question, which we're no at this point in time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Question.
thank you.
Yep, doesn't matter where it's located. Good question. So to give you a sense of, sometimes it feels like in school finance, like 2 + 2 = fish. Here's a sense of how, with this new system, and I'm glad Mr. Scott asked of, well, if we don't change anything, what's going to happen to our tax rate? So if we look at 2025 based upon your certified levies. So I separated these two again because the denominator on the net assessed value side is different. So your operations and your debt service has a total levy of $9 million. For those of you who like to do the calculation on your phone, take that 9 million divided by 1.2 billion. Then you multiply that by 100 because it's per $100 of assessed value, and you get a tax rate of about 75 cents in 2025. Same math applies for the referendum rate or the referendum debt. The one thing that changes is that denominator on the assessed value side. You get your tax rate of about 33 cents. So based upon the trends we're seeing, even making some assumptions on 3% growth for homestead properties and your 2% properties, your assessed value could decrease. So looking to next year, if we assume 4% increase in your operations fund, keeping your debt service levy flat. So a slight increase in your total levy, making that assumption that your AV is going to decrease, your tax rate, in this example, would rise from 74 cents to 78 cents due to no fault of your own. I'm going to say that again for dramatic effect. Is making the assumption on operations fund 4% growth, which is allowable per state law, keeping your debt service levy flat. So your levy would go from about 9 million to 9.3. We're assuming that your AV will drop, which is driving up your tax rate in 2026. Same applies here. If we just keep the referendum debt flat, and we assume that your referendum AV, which is your normal taxable value plus TIF AV, we make that same assumption on the decrease, keeping your levy flat, we're expecting another tax rate increase, again, due to no fault of your own, with a referendum debt tax rate. So let's play a little game of what if. I want to give you a sense of directionally, if there were no changes, based upon the same assumptions on gross assessed value, a 3% increase on homestead property and 3% increases on the 2% property. Your $1.2 billion AV, based upon those trends, could have been $1.47 billion by 2032. Whereas the yellow line represents, well, with the phase in of these new deductions, based upon these broad assumptions on what could happen year to year, the yellow line now, we're actually going to trend downwards on AV going forward. So that yellow line, if you listen to nothing else I say tonight, based upon going back to Mr. Scott's question, because of this new legislation, this yellow line is more likely to occur than the blue line. So we're expecting your AV to drop over the next 6-7 years due to no fault of your own. It's just the new property tax system, the way it works. So as a result, here is a snapshot of your total tax rate going back to 2009. We've averaged right around $1.23 over the past 10 years. Your 2025 tax rate's $1.08. So if we kept the assumption of 4% max levy growth quotient increases year by year on the old system in the blue, with that $1.4 billion AV, could add a $1.05 tax rate. But with the change in deductions for the 1% bucket, 2% in business personal property, if we keep the exact same levy assumptions, you see about a 40-cent difference compared to the old system compared to the new system. So again, it changes the dynamic of tax rate management because of what we're seeing here. But what I want you, so not to add to greater confusion, but in the past, greater tax rate increase typically meant that the taxpayer is paying more. That's not necessarily true, as you remember going through that first example. So now that you see what the trend is, I'm going to come back to this slide. This average taxpayer paying $2,633, even though the tax rate's increasing in this illustration, you're not necessarily paying more because of these new deductions. So everything we thought no longer is from a tax rate management standpoint. So that was a lot. You got about a 45-minute exposure to 300-page bill. So what we see and what we're telling boards is this is the first step in probably multiple conversations. Because if I'm in your shoes, what I want, my takeaway is our tax rate's going to increase because of these new deductions. So the next phase, and you're getting some exposure now, you're well ahead of your peers throughout the state of getting some exposure. So now with Dr. White, Mr. Scott, let's begin to quantify some of these impacts. Now, the DLGF is still releasing some new guidance and regulations based upon this new legislation. We're still waiting on some greater clarity on that $300 credit. So my point being that even as we try to quantify some of these impacts, more information will become available later this year, and speculating that the General Assembly could continue to tinker with property taxes in this new system year by year. So sorry to say, may not be the last time you see my face talking about property tax changes. So next step is quantify the impact, try to get a handle on what that could mean over the next 5-6 years. Then if you're like some of your peers and you expect a revenue reduction, what's that sustainability plan look like? So if you have to reduce cost or right size your budget, how are you going to make those decisions? What's that process? Then how do you continue to monitor and make certain you're not impacted more greatly as changes are made year by year? So what I typically do is suck the air out of a room during these conversations. So welcome feedback. There's something I could have illustrated differently. So this is about the fourth presentation I've given. Welcome your input or feedback if could provide a little more clarity on anything. Last slide is there's some Baker Tilly propaganda if you like it. Any questions, or want me to go back to a slide to re-emphasize a point, or ask a more detailed level question? It's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed right now because there are a lot of changes that are being implemented.
How about a question? One of the last slides that showed the tax, historical and illustrative tax rates, that one right there. I'm going to pose a question in an attempt, like in my own layman's terms, so I can try to understand. So I'm sorry for how simple, but I can't. Is it accurate to say that the tax rate, the projection is that under these new rules, the tax rate's actually going to increase, even though individual taxpayers are in theory going to be paying less or flatline? Is it an accurate thing to say that the tax rate almost has to climb to capture the same dollars we're getting now?
Yeah, that's
because of all the deductions in the new rules. If the tax rate doesn't climb, the losses to taxing units like this would be so substantial. Like if the tax rate flatlined under the new rules, we would get significantly less revenue than we are. Is that a decent way of saying it?
Yeah, you're exactly
okay.
Right. You're exactly right. So because of the taxable value, if you keep the tax rate level, you'll generate less revenue.
So we'll almost have to try to educate our community that that tax rate number, as it rises, the other things the state have put in place, kind of almost trying to educate the community, just because the tax rate is reading much higher on their bill doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be paying out significantly more to the school system or what have you. And that, right, there probably will need to be some education around that point.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. Your instincts are right on. It's just because the tax rate's going up. We've always known that the higher tax rate, the more you're going to pay. But in this example, because this assessed value is decreasing, you have to increase the tax rate just to maintain. So going back to, not to jump around again, from a school district standpoint, let's think about it from a school district standpoint. Look with probably most simplistically looking at the referendum debt. So even generating the same levy, 4.75 million, to keep that same level of revenue, in this estimate, sorry again, your tax rate has to go up by about half a penny just to maintain what you have. So as a result, if you stay where you are with the $1.08, you will total tax rate, you'll generate fewer dollars. So what that translates to that individual taxpayer is, even though we're assuming their tax rate is going up year by year from 262 to 273 to 288, 306, 324, 345, 367. Apologies. Even with almost $1 increase, $1.05 increase, because that AV amount is going down so dramatically in 2031, on paper, they would only be paying $200 more, even though the tax rate's $1.05 more than what it is in 2025. So you're spot on with your words of granted the tax rate doesn't necessarily correlate now to paying a higher tax bill. A lot of that has to do with this new $300 supplemental homestead credit, $300 or 10%.
Maybe a quick follow-up question. I need to not commandeer all the time for questions, but I'll just ask one more. Regarding the referendum debt and the reality that TIFT assessed value does get put into the equation for referendum debt. And as you know, we have referendum debt here. So the Amazon construction and that TIFT, that'll end up getting put in the calculation for the referendum debt.
When it comes online. Yep.
So is it possible on the referendum debt line, that tax rate number will actually go down as
Yes.
the Amazon property comes online, and that piece of it, the individual taxpayers might pay a little bit less and Amazon's piece will pick up.
Is
that-
that growth? Yeah, and that's a really important.
And I would think that'd be substantial AV growth with the Amazon piece and the battery plant across the road, that we all might get a little bit of help on the referendum side from their landing here, so to speak.
Absolutely. So if you continue to get more than 3% growth in any of these areas, it could help the trend on the yellow line. So if you get more homes built, you get apartment complexes, you get Amazon when it comes online for the referendum debt, that yellow line could trend up if you get more growth. Absolutely.
That's exactly what my question was, with the growth aspect that has potential to help us in those large players.
Mhm.
But it's also very appealing for big business coming to Indiana.
Could be, yeah. If they're making that decision for purposes of taxes, yeah, we're a low tax state. I think we're overall 11th lowest per capita property taxes. So back to that point of, so what now? So as more information becomes available, we'll continue to monitor what the DLGF interprets from this bill and continue to stay in communication with Mr. Scott and Dr. White in determining like how do we quantify now as more information becomes available, what that revenue reduction could be to new prairie schools.
Before we go anywhere, there was one number, we're currently at 0.35, and if we go over it 2.
That's the charter thing. I
So,
think it's the charter thing, like currently 0.35%. If we go over 2%.
2% or 100 students, whichever is greatest.
Yeah, it's typically, it's a less than, but if this bill is specifically a greater of. So 2% of your ADM, somebody might be able to do the math better than me, what, that 56 students? So if you had 57 students, yours would be the greater of. So if you have 2% attending charter schools, you don't have 100, so you wouldn't be required to share the revenue based upon talking with council throughout the state on what it truly means. So your figure right now, based upon your ADM, is 100 kids.
Do you know by chance, I'm still wrapping my head around, when do they change as far as charter, because back in February, I was at a legislative meeting and one of the co-authors of it said, no, the charter school had to be in your account. When did that change from February to April?
Good question.
Was it one of those last minute
Yeah, it's one of
backdoor
the
deals?
last minute changes. I can't say the exact amendment. It was added, but it was added as one of those final amendments to the final bill. But yeah, you're right. Initially it was, you're Dr. Ryder, exactly right. Initially it had to be located within your taxing district. But it was changed. So I think we have some follow-up conversations that will occur. One of my colleagues, I think, will be up here in July talking about, now that we know this, what could be some options, the way to approach debt and generate some revenue and still not greatly impact the taxpayer. Welcome questions. If you're like me and you go home and watching watching a baseball game, watching the Cardinals beat the Cubs. And
In front of a half-empty stadium.
watching a baseball game, you think of a question, please share it with Dr. White and Scott. I'm happy to follow up for you. Good to see you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Such a minimum. 7 to 10 years. It's like what we have and what we're gonna have. Let's see.
So, any more discussion or anything amongst the board? If not, we'll go and adjourn this work session, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. It is 5 o'clock. We will start our regular school meeting. I will do the Call to order once again. The school board recognizes the value of public comment and educational issues on the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on corporation matters. Community members requesting permission to address the board are required to complete a registration form prior to a motion to approve a specific agenda item. Individuals will be permitted to speak during a specific agenda item before a vote takes place. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. Any question on personnel should be directed to the superintendent by contacting his office. No participant may speak more than once, will be limited to 3 minutes, and may not pass 3 minutes to another participant. First thing on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. Might I please have a motion? Moved by Mr. Demeyer. Can I have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. And that will pass 5-0. Next on the agenda are consent items. Could I please have a motion to approve consent items?
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Goddard. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Shale. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving consent items, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion will pass 5-0. And reports. Nothing this. Okay.
Nothing tonight.
So no reports tonight. So we are just going to move on to action items. Action item A is to accept donations. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board accept the following donations. New Prairie High School Athletic Department received $250 from Nathan Schultz of St. Louis, Missouri, in memory of Rich Witkowski. The New Prairie High School Key Club received $200 from the LaPorte Kiwanis Club to cover the cost of a breakfast hosted by the Key Club. And Olive Township Elementary received $100 from Jeff Jones and Mark and Beth Pohl. So with that, could I please have a motion to accept donations, please?
So moved.
Got a motion from Ms. Smith. Could I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Demeyer. Any discussion?
Say thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor of accepting donations as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion will pass 5-0. Action item B is to approve the summer 2025 band schedule. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the summer 2025 band schedule. Could I please have a motion to approve the summer 2025 band schedule, please?
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Shale. Can I have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Mr. Goddard. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the 2025 summer band schedule, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion will carry 5-0. Action item C is to approve the Smart Systems renewal for 2025-2026 school year. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the Smart Systems renewal for the 2025-2026 school year. Could I please have a motion to approve the Smart Systems renewal for the 2025-2026 school year, please? Got a motion from Mr. Demeyer. Can I have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the Smart Systems renewal for 2025-2026 school year, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Action item D is to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of dairy proposals. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of dairy proposals. May I please have a motion to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of dairy proposals, please?
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Goddard. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shale. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of dairy proposals, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. That motion will carry 5-0. Action item E is to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of food proposals. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of food proposals. Can I please have a motion to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of food proposals, please?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Smith. Can I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Demeyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of food proposals, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion will pass 5-0. Action item F is to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of snack and beverage proposals. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of snack and beverage proposals. Can I please have a motion to approve the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of snack and beverage proposals, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Smith. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Demeyer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the 2025-2026 NIESC renewal of snack and beverage proposals, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion will pass 5-0. Action item G is to approve the replacement of the diesel fuel dispenser. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the replacement of the diesel fuel dispenser conducted by R.W. Mercer Company for a total cost of $13,414.55 from the operations fund. Could I please have a motion to approve the replacement of the diesel fuel dispenser for a cost of $13,414.55 from operations fund, please?
So moved.
Got a motion for Mr. Shale. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goddard. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the replacement of the diesel fuel dispenser for a cost of $13,414.55 from operations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion will pass 5-0. Action item H is to approve debt services payments. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the following debt service payments. Our general obligation bond 2023A in the amount of $178,200 due on June 30th, 2025. The general obligation bond 2023B in the amount of $136,337.50 due on June 30th, 2025. Our mortgage mortgage lease 2015 in the amount of $181,500 due on July 15th, 2025. The quality school construction bond 2011 in the amount of $79,350 due on July 15th, 2025. The general obligation bond 2020A in the amount of $321,700 due on July 15th, 2025. And the referendum 2016 in the amount of $2,501,500 due on July 15th, 2025, for a total of $3,398,587.50. So may I please have a motion to approve the debt service payments for a total of $3,398,587.50, please.
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Goddard. Okay. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shale. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the debt service payments for a total of $3,398,587.50, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that motion will pass 5-0. Action item I is to approve the agreement with Computer Logic Group. It is the recommendation of administration that the board approve the agreement with Computer Logic Group under a 2-year agreement at a total cost of $14,200. This Power School hosting service will improve performance and reliability, direct access to expert support, and a greater data security and compliance. So could we please have a motion to approve the agreement with Computer Logic Group for a total cost of $14,200 for a 2-year agreement, please?
So moved.
Have a motion from Mr. DeMeyer. Have a second?
I will second.
Seconded by Ms. Smith. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the 2-year agreement with Computer Logic Group at a total cost of $14,200, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. And that motion passes 5-0. Action item J, is to approve the Securely Visitor and Securely Pass Visitor Management System. It is the recommendation of administration that the board approve the Securely Visitor and Securely Pass Visitor Management System at a total cost of $5,615, which is a cost savings compared to the current Raptor subscription. Just a little background, last school year, we paid $6,415 to the Raptor subscription, which did not include the digital hallway pass. So we're actually getting more for less. So we'll be have a savings of about $800 for this first year. And then in year 2, that savings will actually increase because this year, the first year, we also had to pay a $500 fee on top of it just to get things going. So in year 2, that savings will even increase if we choose to continue with Securely Visitor. So with that, can I have a motion to approve the Securely Visitor and Securely Pass Visitor Management Systems at a total cost of $5,615, please?
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Goddard. Could I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shale. Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the Securely Visitor and Securely Pass Visitor Management System at a total cost of $5,615. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion will pass 5-0. Action item K, and our final action item of the evening, is to approve some overnight field trip requests. It is the recommendation of the administration that the board approve the following overnight field trip request. The New Prairie High School boys basketball team to attend the Indiana Wesleyan University Super Hoops basketball camp at Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana, June 27th through June 29th. The New Prairie High School boys soccer team to attend Purdue Fort Wayne soccer camp at Purdue Fort Wayne in Fort Wayne, Indiana, July 7th through the 10th. The New Prairie Middle School HOSA Club to attend the HOSA International Leadership Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, June 17th through the 22nd. New Prairie High School girls basketball team to attend the Indiana Wesleyan University Summer Team Camp at Indiana Wesleyan University in Marion, Indiana, June 17th through the 19th. New Prairie High School dance team to attend the DTU camp at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois, June 23rd through June 24th. New Prairie High School FFA team to attend the Indiana FFA State Convention at Purdue University in West Lafayette, June 17th through the 19th. And the New Prairie High School cheer team to attend the UCA camp at Anderson University in Anderson, Indiana, June 19th through 21st. So with that, could I please have a motion to approve these overnight field trip requests?
So moved.
Got a motion from Ms. Smith. Can I have a second? Seconded by Mr. DeMeyer. Hopefully we have no one that will not vote in favor of these, since many of them have taken place already. Any discussion over the overnight field trip requests, please? All right, all those in favor of approving these overnight field trip requests, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And that will pass 5-0. We have no discussion items this month. We'll move on to board comments, and we'll start over with Mr. DeMeyer. Ms. Smith. Mr. Cottage.
Nothing.
Mr. Shell.
Nothing here.
And the only thing I will have is just a reminder that our next board meeting, which will be held here in the boardroom, will be moved up 1 week from our normal time, and that is July, what is that? July 21st. Thank you. July 21st at 6 p.m. Central Time. So is there any further business from the board? Since there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned.